When Alexander showed us the carpets from his collection and shared his insights from his study of them, I was struck by this powerful manifestation in them very clearly of the potential of life and beauty in the making of architectural space. The carpets in particular are an artifact, a kind of being that transforms an ordinary floor from an anonymous spatial platform into a stage of power and potential. A foreshadowing of 21st century art, the book that documents Alexander's rug collection provided essential guidance for me into this process of building beauty. What we then developed out of this was an integration of two practices, of designing and of weaving, of making, to carry this 14th century tradition forward into the 21st century. Following Alexander's lead, I drew the carpets, first freehand, then on graph paper, eventually using a paint program on the computer, utilizing the foundation of the orthogonal pixel grid, reflecting the warp and the weft structure of the carpets, so that the placing of each knot, of each color, of each tiny bit of light, step by step, piece by piece, knot by knot, revealed to me, not just the life and beauty of each particular design and design motif, but if I can be so bold, what felt like a glimpse into the underlying structure of reality, of being itself. Although the geometry of each design was always initially elusive, I often found myself transcending this kind of difficulty of figuring out a particular pattern and getting into this kind of meditative trance state. I started off drawing in black and white, but then another breakthrough occurred when I added color to the process, because it then felt like each knot was a little piece of light, and the placement of each in this step-by-step process became a kind of a magical game where one's constantly asking, moment to moment, does this piece go here or there? And each move shifts the centers and alternating figures and lattices of the larger shapes. Working within this warp and weft grid structure, we consider how the weavers also worked with these knots of wool, placing them row after row along each previous horizontal weft line. When we look at the line of the arabesque in this drawing of the Lotto field, we can see this intention. I don't want to call it an illusion, rather I think of it as a reflection or a reference to this interwoven structure, where when we add one black knot here, for example, and we add several black knots here, for example, the structure of the wool itself, the interwoven structure of the warp and the weft, the structure of this textile universe is reflected in the drawing. And here in the Damascus carpet or the Paramamluk carpet, the interlace seems to actually confound the orthogonal structure of the warp and the weft. And as it moves from the dark green to the yellow, the bright yellow, to the white, the undyed wool, we also see these stars interwoven into that interlace of the arabesque lines, emanating this kind of light, this movement, this power, life. This carpet, which we know is really just an inanimate object, actually starts to dance before our eyes as we gaze into this kind of infinite space. If we look at the back of the carpet, there we can see more clearly the structure and the finishes, the warp, the weft, the selvages, the gleam, the fringes. The way the carpet is set up on a loom, the initial structure, the vertical yarns are the warp, and they determine the length of the carpet. Here we've actually used a yellow dyed warp, and then we can see that extended into the gleam, and then obviously into the extra long fringes, which is again something we see in the early 14th to 16th century carpets, not something we see in modern carpets. And of course, these colored warps are the framework for the whole structure of the carpet. And then we also use a dyed weft, which is placed in the interwoven with the warp after each line of knots is looped. Here we're using actually two different colors of a weft yarn. We're using a red, and then that alternates with a yellow. And then you can see how that also then at the end finishes becomes this this selvage, which keeps the entire carpet together once it's taken off the loom. It also has this kind of alternating pattern of the red and the yellow. And although both the warp and the weft yarns are concealed beneath the pile structure on the front of the carpet, we can see them on the back. And also, if the carpet lasts hundreds of years, it starts to wear through a little bit. We'll start to see some of the warp yarns, the colored yarns on the front of the carpet. And we see that in some of the older carpets where there's wear. And this is one of the things that distinguishes our carpets and the traditional carpets from the modern carpets. Because modern carpets use white cotton warps and wefts, where we're using colored wool warps and wefts. We see these brilliant colors in the original carpets, which is part of their power. And all of these colors are derived from the use of natural dye stuffs. For red, we have the madder root. For the yellow, Reseda luteola, dyer's weld, which is a weed. And for the blue, of course, indigo, from the indigo plant. And other colors we see in the Damascus carpet in particular, the greens, the purples, the blacks, are also derived from these natural substances combined with different mordants, pre-dye preparations, water temperature variations. all of which yield these bright, intense colors, which are both incredibly light fast and color fast. And then when combined with the hand-combed and hand-carded wool, give us this incredible palette. The reds, the blues, the yellows, which is both naturally harmonious and subtly variegated. The best way to make a long-lasting carpet, as obviously indicated by the incredible durability of the Anatolian models, is to use this hand-spun wool and natural vegetal dyes. Hand-spun wool is stronger as it preserves the full length of the wool fibers and it retains the essential lanolin, the oils, the waxes that really keep the wool clean, repel dirt, and preserve the structure. They also absorb the dyes, this lanolin and the handspun wool, in a slightly more intense and varied way. The natural dyes, in tandem with the handspun wool, create this slight variation in the color of the yarn, which we call abrash. It's not exaggerated. We sometimes see it exaggerated in some modern carpets, as if they've been artificially aged. It's almost subliminal in the classical designs. And as a result of this, there's this kind of harmonious warming or blending even between these contrasting colors, which kind of reinforces their inherent harmony. And part of this is because if we look at this on a molecular level, the colors from the natural sources, the madder, the weld, the indigo, they're not completely uniform. They actually contain elements of other colors within them, which enables them to better blend with each other. I wonder if this interweaving and overlap can be seen as a kind of a fractal feature and related to the actual material structure of both the wool and the weaving process itself. Do the arabesques of these carpet designs emerge out of, are they pictures of, a fractal process, the physical materials, and the interwoven structure of the process of carpet making itself? And then could this character extend from the cellular structure of the wool, encompassing the carding and the spinning of the wool into yarn, the use of natural dyestuffs that in their molecular structure contain colors beyond which can be perceived by the naked eye, the warp and weft foundation, the knotting of the pile, the assembling of the selvage, the colleen, the fringe, the finishes. Are we all then the weavers and designers, lacing bits of energy, little gems of light into the interwoven lattice of the carpets that emerges from and are a picture of an infinite and awe-inspiring universe, as well as our limited ability to glimpse this, even if only for a second.